appearance and occurrence of microspherules, very, very tiny spherical shaped melted pieces of mineral grain.
For centuries, the mysterious fate of Lot's wife has lingered between faith and legend. A moment in the book of Genesis so dramatic, so sudden, that many dismissed it as impossible. How could a woman truly become a pillar of salt? How could a single glance backward seal a person's destiny forever? Most modern thinkers treat the account as a moral fable, nothing more. Yet deep in the unforgiving landscape of the Dead Sea, where salt mountains rise like ancient monuments and the earth itself seems frozen in time, archaeologists have uncovered something that is forcing many to rethink everything they thought they knew. Recent expeditions into the region surrounding Mount Sodom have revealed unusual spherical microspherules, tiny melted mineral grains, along with towering salt formations that bear a haunting resemblance to a human figure. For the first time, researchers are openly admitting that the geological evidence and the biblical narrative intersect far more closely than once believed. What they found here has left even seasoned experts stunned. As we journey through these discoveries, we're not just exploring a physical landscape. We're stepping into a story thousands of years old, a story of obedience, judgment, and the consequences of looking back when God commands us to move forward. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss future investigations into the hidden truths buried beneath history. In the stark silence of the Dead Sea Valley, where heat shimmers above the salt-crusted earth, a survey team paused over something they couldn't immediately explain. From a distance, it appeared to be one more salt pillar rising along the base of Mount Sodom. But as light shifted across its surface, the formation revealed an outline strangely similar to a human figure. The team had documented countless natural structures before, yet this one carried an unsettling precision, as though shaped by more than erosion or time. Curiosity turned into concern once drone footage offered a closer look. High-angle shots captured a symmetry that didn't fit the region's typical geological patterns. The contours seemed deliberate, almost sculpted, prompting archaeologists on site to call for full-spectrum scanning. Within hours, portable spectrometers, thermal imagers, and ground-penetrating radar were arranged around the formation like instruments prepared for an operation. Early readings were fragmented, but one detail stood out: internal density variations that hinted at something hidden beneath the crystalline layers. The surrounding landscape deepened the mystery. Not far from the pillar, remnants of ancient structures lay half-buried under sediment, ruins long associated with settlements mentioned in early Near Eastern records. Their presence raised an uncomfortable question. Could this formation be linked to an event remembered across cultures as sudden and catastrophic? To better understand what they were dealing with, researchers began comparing their scans with historical accounts describing the destruction of cities in this region. Passages from Genesis, writings from Josephus, and reports from early travelers all pointed to the Dead Sea Valley as the site of an immense calamity. The similarities between these ancient descriptions and the physical evidence now emerging from the scans were impossible to ignore. As data collected from multiple instruments suggested the formation's unusual nature, the quiet survey quickly transformed into a full-scale investigation. Specialists from geology, archaeology, and ancient history were brought in, each trying to determine whether the pillar's striking shape was a rare geological accident or a remnant of a moment frozen in time thousands of years ago, long before modern instruments traced their beams across the Dead Sea cliffs. The story of a woman turned to salt had already taken deep root in the memory of the ancient world. The destruction of Sodom, preserved in the book of Genesis, spoke of cities consumed by fire and a family urged to flee without looking back. When Lot's wife paused, and turned toward the life she was leaving behind, she was said to have become a pillar of salt, a moment of disobedience etched into sacred history. For centuries, travelers retold this account, convinced the landscape still carried traces of that event. Early Jewish, Christian, and Arabic traditions described a solitary salt figure standing in the wilderness, weathered by time yet recognizable in form. These stories blended spiritual meaning with physical geography, suggesting that the land itself bore witness to a long-ago catastrophe. Among the most striking testimonies came from the first-century historian Josephus, who claimed to have seen the pillar during his lifetime and noted that it remained visible to those who passed by. Centuries later, explorers of the 1800s and early 1900s wandered the same rugged terrain, documenting unusual formations along the western shores of the Dead Sea. Their sketches and journals record structures that resembled twisted silhouettes, but the tools available at the time could not determine how these shapes had formed. Still, their descriptions formed a valuable archive, one that modern researchers would eventually revisit. As archaeologists and geologists began studying the newly discovered formation, they turned to these old expedition notes for comparison. To their surprise, several early observations matched the dimensions, location, and general appearance of the pillar, now under investigation. This unexpected alignment encouraged specialists from biblical archaeology, Middle Eastern studies, and earth sciences to join forces, pooling data from both the past and present. Through this collaboration, the first wave of scientific tests uncovered something intriguing. The salt crystallization patterns on the formation did not behave like the slow, predictable structures typically created by natural erosion. Instead, they showed signs of rapid mineral binding and unusual layering, hinting at circumstances far more complex than ordinary geological processes. Piece by piece, researchers realized they were not just studying a strange salt column. They were tracing the long and tangled history of a legend that had traveled through cultures, centuries, and scientific disciplines, converging once again on the silent cliffs near the Dead Sea. As researchers expanded their study around the strange, human-shaped pillar, the ground itself began revealing clues that complicated every simple explanation. The first hints came from routine field notes. Thin layers of sediment surrounding the base contained burnt clay fragments and microscopic beads of melted minerals known as microspherules. These tiny spheres, often formed only under conditions of intense heat, immediately suggested that the area had experienced a violent thermal event at some point in the distant past. Laboratory tests deepened the mystery. Samples taken from the surface of the formation showed concentrations of sulfur and halite fused together at temperatures far beyond anything typically produced by the region's natural climate. This fusion pattern didn't resemble slow geological change. It looked sudden, as though the minerals had been exposed to heat strong enough to liquefy them before rapidly cooling again. Under microscopic examination, researchers noticed scorching that traveled in specific directions across nearby rocks, almost as if shaped by a blast wave. To understand the scale of this heat, specialists conducted isotope studies on the surrounding materials. The results pointed toward a rapid, high-energy event, something capable of generating extreme temperatures in seconds, potentially a natural explosion or an atmospheric blast. This type of signature was rare but not unheard of, especially in regions known to experience seismic instability and meteor activity. Geologists then mapped the terrain more extensively and found fault lines and collapse zones in patterns consistent with sudden destruction, not gradual erosion. The landscape seemed to preserve the aftermath of a catastrophic moment, its features frozen in a configuration that echoed ancient accounts of devastation in the valley. As evidence accumulated, experts found themselves split. Some argued the formation remained a remarkable but natural geological structure, distorted by heat and shifting earth. Others saw the possibility of something far more unusual, perhaps even a preserved remnant caught in the violence of an ancient disaster. The conflicting data, rather than resolving the investigation, created new questions that pushed the team toward more advanced internal scanning. What they had uncovered so far was only the surface. The pillar's true nature, it seemed, was hidden deeper within its crystalline core. Suspicion deepens the moment researchers examine the pillar's interior for the first time. The initial surface scans had already raised eyebrows, but the high-resolution tomography pushes the investigation into unfamiliar territory. Instead of the solid, predictable interior expected from a natural salt formation, the imaging reveals a web of hollow channels and dense pockets, features that simply do not match the behavior of ordinary geological pillars. Something about the internal structure feels intentional, or at the very least, violently altered by forces far beyond slow environmental erosion. As analysts probe further, unusual mineral veins begin to map themselves across the scans. Their branching lines echo the shapes of organic structures, faint but unmistakable, patterns no survey team anticipated. When chemical samples are tested, the results add another layer of discomfort. Compounds associated with combustion and sudden thermal shock appear in concentrations difficult to explain by regional climate or natural decay. Temperature modeling specialists join the study, and their findings change the tone of the investigation. The data suggests the pillar was exposed to a surge of extreme heat, not over centuries, but in a single catastrophic event. This forces historians to revisit ancient accounts describing episodes of fire and brimstone, discovering that some descriptions bear striking similarities to modern analyses of meteor airburst disasters. The debate quickly becomes multidisciplinary and heated. Some geologists insist the anomalies must have a natural, if unusual, origin. Others argue the alignment between the geological evidence and historical narratives is too precise to dismiss. As pressure builds, the team faces its most consequential decision yet, whether to drill a micro-core sample directly from the pillar, a step that could confirm the truth, but risks irreversible damage to a formation already steeped in mystery. The tension surrounding the investigation reaches its peak when the long-awaited core sample is finally taken. Researchers approach the pillar expecting geological clarity, yet what emerges from the extracted core only deepens the sense of unease. Instead of uniform salt layers, the core reveals a sequence of sharp, stratified bands, some of them vitrified, as though the material had been exposed to blistering heat in a single, violent moment. This alone would be unusual, but the deeper the team analyzes the sample, the more unsettling the findings become. The cavity structure mapped earlier now takes on new meaning. Measurements show that the inner contours echo the approximate proportions of a human torso. The resemblance is not exact, but it is close enough to fracture scientific consensus. Some argue coincidence, the kind of natural shape that occasionally forms by chance. Others consider the alignment too precise to ignore, especially when paired with the chemical evidence. Under the microscope, analysts identify microspherules, tiny, glass-like beads typically formed during high-energy impact events, as well as carbonized traces trapped between the layers. These patterns point to rapid crystallization, something that cannot be achieved by slow, natural geological processes. Instead, they hint at abrupt formation under extraordinary conditions, possibly the very type of explosive heat burst described in ancient accounts of catastrophe. As historians revisit early testimonies describing a woman frozen or crystallized in the midst of destruction, public fascination surges. The findings quickly ignite global debate. Is this pillar a geological anomaly shaped by chance, evidence of a human form preserved at the instant of disaster? Or could it be a lingering physical echo of the biblical narrative surrounding Lot's wife? The controversy refuses to settle. Specialists in geology, archaeology, history, and impact science each interpret the data through different lenses, leaving the final conclusion suspended between science, history, and belief. What unfolded inside Mount Sodom remains one of the most contested and intriguing mysteries still under investigation. As the final samples are sealed, the scanners shut down, and the last field notes are written, the investigation at Mount Sodom enters a strange space between discovery and uncertainty. What began as a routine geological survey has evolved into one of the most debated findings in modern archaeological research. No matter how many instruments are pointed at the pillar, no matter how many models and simulations are run, the answers remain frustratingly incomplete. Instead, the pillar stands unchanged, silent, weathered, and indifferent to the theories that now surround it. Researchers leave the site in small groups, carrying hard drives full of data and images that will be re-examined for years. Some walk away convinced that they have glimpsed the remnants of an ancient catastrophe, an event powerful enough to scorch the landscape and fuse matter in an instant. Others maintain that nature, with its unpredictable processes and rare geological quirks, can create shapes and structures that appear far more intentional than they truly are. But even they acknowledge that the combination of scorched mineral layers, vitrified residues, and the eerie interior cavity is unlike anything typically associated with salt formations. Historians and cultural scholars, meanwhile, watch the debate unfold with a different lens. For them, the discoveries do not confirm or deny any singular story. Instead, they highlight how deeply human beings seek to understand their past. The tale of Lot's wife, whether viewed as historical memory, spiritual metaphor, or moral legend, has endured for thousands of years precisely because it speaks to universal themes: disobedience, consequence, transformation, and the fragile boundary between life and disaster. The pillar on the shores of the Dead Sea now adds a physical dimension to that narrative, inviting further reflection rather than supplying final answers. When news of the finding spreads, the public reaction becomes a phenomenon of its own. Some see the discovery as validation of ancient texts. Others view it as a reminder of how much of Earth's history still lies hidden, misunderstood, or erased by time. Scientists from distant fields begin offering interpretations. Impact specialists, anthropologists, sedimentologists, atmospheric researchers, all drawn into the mystery. With each new perspective, the story becomes richer, more layered, and more difficult to resolve. As the sun sets behind the jagged ridge of Mount Sodom, the pillar's silhouette stretches across the desert floor, just as it has for ages. Tourists arrive, standing quietly before it, some with reverence, others with curiosity, all aware that they are looking at something that has survived far beyond the memory of any civilization. What truly happened here, whether a sudden blast of natural force, a geological anomaly, or a moment of ancient tragedy, remains locked within the stone. But perhaps that is what keeps the mystery alive, not the idea of solving it, but the understanding that some stories endure because they cannot be fully explained. They occupy the space where science meets tradition, where evidence meets belief, where history meets myth. The pillar of Mount Sodom, disputed and enigmatic, now serves as a crossroads for all three. As researchers prepare for future expeditions, new technology, and deeper scans, they acknowledge one simple truth. Whatever the final explanation may be, this discovery has already reshaped how we view the intersection of ancient narratives and the physical world. The debate will continue, the theories will evolve, and the questions will expand, but the pillar will remain, watching over the barren landscape, refusing to give up its secrets easily. Whether it is a natural formation with remarkable quirks, the memorial of a long-forgotten disaster, or the physical echo of a moment preserved in cultural memory, the mystery of Lot's wife endures. And as long as it stands, humanity will continue to wonder, investigate, and imagine what truly happened on the day the earth around the Dead Sea was transformed forever. Thank you for joining this journey into one of the most perplexing archaeological stories of our time. If you'd like to explore more discoveries, reconstructions, and mysteries from the ancient world, remember to subscribe, stay curious, and step with us into the next chapter of the past.